Welcome to the Growth, Grace, and Prosperity Podcast. Join Stewart Heath for down-to-earth conversations with top professionals, entrepreneurs, and leaders who have a story to tell. Let's get rolling.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Growth, Grace, and Prosperity Podcast. I'm Stewart Heath, your host, the founder and CEO of Harvard Grace Capital. Today is our guest, Amanda, and I confess I do not know how to pronounce your name properly, but we are so grateful you're here.
It's Cecconi.
Cecconi. Great. Well, that doesn't sound as complicated. Thank you so much for taking the time. You've obviously had a very successful career, and we are excited to hear all about it. So without any further ado, I'm going to jump in and ask you a few questions.
Sounds good. And thank
Amanda,
you.
Oh, absolutely. When you think back on your career, and you know, if you've looked at all of my guests are, let's just say, executives of a certain age. So
I say adults. That's a term I'm using for anybody under 50 is not an adult. That's where, you know.
Yeah, I would have gone with 40, but yeah, you're really right. So when you think back, are there moments that you would say really changed the game for your career?
Oh, 100%. And in fact, I'm on the board of my college, which is St. Vincent in Latrobe, Pennsylvania. It's a little Benedictine school in Western PA. And another member of our board is the former Jaguar CFO. And I started my professional career at Ford Motor Company in finance, believe it or not, after getting a master's degree. And I sat down with this woman because we were both from the same town. And she basically told me, I have a suit in my desk. I don't have any kids. I'm divorced. And if you want a career in finance at Ford Motor Company, that's what you have to do. And I was like, thank you. I'm not doing that. And literally, it became the genesis for me deciding, you know, I want to live a particular lifestyle and I'm going to go somewhere where I can do that. And that was one of the big drivers for me leaving Detroit and moving to Nashville, Tennessee. 30 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that's about the time that General Motors was establishing Saturn down here. And there was a whole bunch of transition from Detroit down here.
Yes.
Was that kind of a culture shock for you?
I was thrilled. I have to tell you, I went to grad school in Michigan and started my career there, but I wanted out the minute I moved to the Detroit area. To be quite, I'm from Pittsburgh, and I thought, oh, this is going to be like Pittsburgh, and it really wasn't. And that was a long time ago, and things were difficult. So I was thrilled. I literally broke down in Franklin visiting because of the Civil War history, because these old guys who were probably my age at Ford Motor Company had told me, you need to go, it's so beautiful. And I thought, I want to raise my kids here. And Edsel Ford built Primus in Cool Springs. It was the first big building. And I volunteered. It could have been a garbage company. And I literally went to his office and said, I'll go. And I think he thought I was crazy, but I was thrilled.
I remember when Primus came to Franklin. It was, one of the first buildings there in Cool Springs.
Exactly.
Would you mind sharing, because we all hit bumps in the road when things don't go exactly as we planned for them to do. Would you mind sharing a bump or two and how you were able to navigate it?
Sure. I think as a kid, it was the 80s and finance and Ford Motor Company. I thought I'd made it. And at 24 years old, I was literally in the cafeteria and thought, if I'm retiring from this place, I'll go crazy. So I didn't know. I thought I wanted an office at a big company and I'd be happy. But I think, and I speak to a lot of college kids. I've spoken at Belmont, at Lipscomb in the past, and at my college. But it isn't so much even the function. It's really about the environment. And I didn't know I was a startup person because I'd never really been exposed to that. But when I got my chance, I really dove headfirst in the pool. And it was really out of a series of, geez, I don't want to do this anymore, not successes, that led me ultimately to the first invitation to participate in a startup. I'd been let go of a company that I thought I would be at for a much longer time, and it really broke my heart. But I think anytime something negative happens, you really have to, look at what is your part. But also, if it's just not a fit, you can't change a company, but you can decide to move. And sometimes it requires that in order to kind of find your destiny. And I tell this to people that I've brought in that I've had to asked to leave at one time or another, but you should go find something that fills you with joy. And if what you're doing doesn't do that, it's going to be a long life. And so I think that I've probably learned more from being let go of companies than I ever did from, being patted on the head and told I'm doing a great job. So
Completely agree. I had a very similar experience in public accounting. My dad was a CPA. I went to college, majored in accounting. I got my CPA license, still have it. Very proud to have that. But after a few years at a big 8 accounting firm, I'm like, oh, I'm way too entrepreneurial for these people. And was able to make the jump relatively smoothly and have started many companies, a few of which are actually still in business. But similar story. Yeah, it's so true. Yeah, I like the way you said that. Go and find what fills you with joy. That is a great way to put it. I love that. Amanda, I hate learning new things, although I'm a firm believer in being a lifelong learner. I think what I should say is I hate learning new things that I don't think that I necessarily need to learn, like a new piece of software. They just all of a sudden decided to just Microsoft Excel, just as an example, they just change it, and these things happen all the time. How do you tackle learning at this stage in your career, whether it's something you've got to learn, you want to learn, or even if it's something you don't think you need to, you shouldn't have to learn?
Sure. I will say that not wanting to learn something new is a sign of age, and I completely represent that feeling. And so
Totally own it.
my team knows that if they bring up a new software platform or one more way for people to get a hold of me, that this year with Slack, I was like, I'm going to die. I cannot handle this.
Right.
But I have to acknowledge, after being drugged to the table, that, I've got a great team, and the technical people who are a lot younger than me are very solid. So when they suggest it, I'm like, I'll give it a try. I know what I'm not good at. At 59 years old, I am great at certain things and not so good at others, and that's not going to change. And that's actually something that took me a long time into my career to realize. If you're not good at math, you're never going to be good at math, but you probably have other skills that, an SAT doesn't pick up. And so I'm a big fan of tools like UScience, which I helped with in the early branding stages of that company, to find your natural gifting and then really push on it. For the things you're not good at, you got to find smart people that are better at that stuff than you. For learning now, with AI and everything else going on, especially in marketing, I always say that the foundational aspects of marketing have not changed since I was in grad school, but the tools change. And so you've got to keep up with the times. And so sometimes you got to hire people that have access to those things and are really going to do that. And for me, I'm a reader, and I've always been a reader. And I think continuously sort of filling up with good content, not things that stress you out necessarily. The world's a little crazy now, but really trying to stay involved. And I don't mean business books. I'm in a CEO group, and I always fuss at these men and say, stop reading books. Do what the last book said and you'll be fine. But I do enjoy reading about culture and history and things that I enjoy. So I hate to say this, but a lot of my, ongoing learning is really a function of personal interests that I have. My husband and I joined Peterson Academy, Jordan Peterson's online educational format that's really cool. And instead of watching TV, we'll start watching a course about nutrition or something that we both have some interest in but are not experts. And so, the world, for all the negative, there's certainly great access to all kinds of wonderful material. And I think if you want to be a lifelong learner, my father was like that. He really modeled that for me. It's very easy to do.
I think life can get very boring if you stop learning. It'll
Oh,
get stale really
absolutely.
fast.
Absolutely.
What's the most impactful thing that you have learned over your career that has helped you shape the culture of your company?
Um, you know, we have introduced some tools that help us to find people that are a good fit. I was virtual before that was cool. I jokingly
Yeah.
like to say that. I think COVID really changed how people work. But my son, my third child, was entering high school. I guess it was right before that. And I really hadn't been around much. And I had a wonderful woman, a therapist, who helped me go through an awful divorce. And she literally said to me, "You need to start a company. You need to do something on your own." And I was terrified. But doing that and being able to set the ground rules for how I was going to work. I work a lot. I'm probably a workaholic, but I could do it where I wanted to, and I could be at his basketball games, I could be at other things and still keep everything going. And so when we identify people that can handle that, not everybody can. I find, unfortunately, a lot of young people really struggle with that sort of virtual environment because they really need more kind of hands-on being around people. But a lot of my folks are very experienced, mostly women who really have families and want a work environment that gives them flexibility. I don't care if people work from midnight to 2 a.m, as long as they're getting everything done. And what we do and how we do it offers the opportunity to do that. And I do think that that has expanded the workforce significantly and provided great opportunity to plug in global resources and other things. And so we try to be smart about that, but it's not for everyone. What we do is hard. There's a lot of responsibility and a lot of you have to have a lot of self-drive. But for the right people, it's a terrific and highly financially advantageous environment.
In that, as you built your team, are you trying to keep them all local so that you can get together when you want to? Or are you really
Absolutely not.
worldwide?
I'm
Okay,
worldwide.
interesting.
In fact, we now
Wow.
have some clients in Great Britain, which is really exciting for me. Yeah, I started my healthcare career in Nashville because there's so much healthcare.
Right.
And I did a bunch of startups and built a bunch of connections, but pretty rapidly, and I've been doing this for 15 years, we've been able to establish a nationwide footprint. So I've got people in Vermont and New York and Dallas and Arkansas and all kinds of places. So I'm more interested in finding the right people than I am having them be here with me. Now, my second in command is in Franklin, but she even moved to Florida for 7 years and we didn't miss a beat. Now, a couple times a year, we'll have a, nun get together and they all come to Nashville, which fortunately people love coming here, probably too much.
Yeah.
But
Right.
so it's always fun for them and we'll have a couple days and, just spend some quality time together.
Having grown up in Nashville, I completely don't get it at all. Why it's now an it city. But
Well, you didn't live
let's
in Detroit. Trust me, if you'd lived in Detroit, you'd be like, this is great.
yeah.
So,
Right. Right. Um, let's shift gears a little bit and talk about finances. Nothing too specific or too personal, but as a successful executive, a successful entrepreneur, how have you diversified your finances away from the companies that so that all of your net worth is not tied up into your current venture? Can
well,
you talk about that a little bit?
sure. I am a planner. That's the one thing I got from my finance start in life, which is a great background for a marketer, I have to tell you, because I'll end up going toe to toe with CFOs frequently, and I can always justify things. I had a really sharp young financial planner who was getting her start, and we connected probably good Lord, probably 15 years ago. And she's walked with me through, and she's become wildly successful, now has offices in San Francisco and Nashville.
Wow.
So I got ahead of the curve. I mean, she forces me to do the things that I need to do. I always say I wouldn't retire if it wasn't for her, because every, 10 minutes she's asking me what I want to do with the company. But that combined with, I've been involved with C12 for 3 years, which is a Christian CEO organization, and that's been really beneficial too. So I get great feedback on just things that, when you're working all the time, you're not thinking about things that you probably should, like what if your second in command left, which would be devastating, and how can you make it financially advantageous for them to stay? Or, when do you plan to retire, and how can you ward against, encroachment by the IRS and other things if you've got people that are not full-time and so forth. So I've had to wade through a bunch of issues, and also to take care of my family should anything happen to me. So I tend to be hyper conservative, and my financial planner knows that. But I think having a good team, I could do that stuff. I started my life doing things like that, but I don't have time. And so having a really good accountant, good tax planning, and a good financial advisor is really critical. I think to separating, when you own a sole proprietary kind of situation, you really need to have expertise along those lines in order to make sure that you're investing in things I mean, she'll call me all the time and say, I know you have a lot of money in your checking account, give it to me. And I'm like, what? But I feel good. It's the Italian in me. I want to bury it in the backyard. It's my natural drive. But
Reminds me of my mother.
There's a lot of that. Like, I feel really good. I feel really good. It's in there. So,
My mother's got almost as much money in her checking account as she does at her brokerage account. Like,
I think I'm a 90-year-old Italian woman. I'm afraid. I really am.
One more question about that. Do you mind sharing some of the asset classes that your investments are in?
Yeah, all of the traditional things you'd expect from mutual funds, and we have some individual stocks when there's an opportunity to get into something that makes sense. I've even invested in some clients in the past when I've had the opportunity to, because I work with a lot of PE-backed, kind of venture-backed organizations. Also, lately, some insurance instruments that are really interesting. This is starting to become more popular. Because they've got to invest in things, and there's some opportunity to really knock down tax liability. So with her direction, we've gotten into that, which has been so far so good. And again, as I said, I don't do crazy things. I assume I'm going to work for a good while longer. So playing the long game is really important. And staying in the same home I've had for a long time, that's been very advantageous in Franklin in particular. But so just
it's probably only worth 10 times what you paid for it. So
that's exactly what it's worth. So good for you. Yeah, put a lot of work into it, but
well, good. So no crypto for you, no derivatives.
No, I am too. I've actually spoken to a variety of companies that are in the crypto space about marketing work, actually. But no, I don't do crazy things. I tend to be not that isn't something that one could do. I'm just kind of a tortoise in the hare type person, and I prefer to know where things are going to go, especially now. There's just so much chaos. I remember my dad running out and buying silver when we were kids. He was an architect with 7 children in the 70s and 80s. Can you imagine? And that didn't turn out to be a great thing, but a lot of people are panicking and buying gold. And, there's nothing wrong with that, certainly. But I think diversification is key, like with anything else in life.
Yeah, I'm kind of lined up there with you. I don't do crypto. I know people who've made a lot of money, but I don't understand it.
No.
And I don't do things I don't understand. So,
amen. That's kind of my attitude. I'm not learning anything new, and that's way too new. So
yeah, right. All right. Last question. This has been fabulous. Thank you so much for your insights. If you had one nugget to share with people who might want to emulate you, or just someone that you were mentoring, what one piece of information would you share with them to help them along their way?
I would say, Stuart, find out what your God-given talent is before you invest in education, before you invest in just a career plan. Most young people basically have their parents as, icons. You only know what your mom and dad did, and generally that is not going to be the right thing for you. So, as I said, a tool like YouScience or other things that can give you some insight into harnessing those native abilities that don't change no matter how much experience or education you get. If you do that, you'll never work a day in your life. My father told me that, and he kind of came into architecture at a time that was good. Actually, none of us are architects, and that was part of his thing too, but he truly loved what he did for a living. And I have to say, I love what I do for a living, but it's not for everybody. And it took me a good 15 years knocking my head against a wall to figure out what type of environment and what type of organizations I wanted to work with. So I think it's a combination of knowing yourself, and then knowing your work style, and then being around people who share those same values can be beneficial as well. So if you are lucky enough to tie that together, and I've really tried with my children to kind of push them in the direction where, I felt like they were called. So if your work can be a calling, and listen, I got a kid who's a comedian, one who's a PhD candidate, and another who's a singer and a data analyst. So they are wildly different kids, but there's a calling in all of that, and they're perfectly suited for those things. So I think that if you tap into that, you're going to have a very enjoyable work life.
I wish I could share that with, I have 3 20-somethings sort of just in the middle of my kid group, and they're all just struggling to find their way in the world. And part of it is that COVID generation. They
It
were
is.
all, they call it the lost generation. So anyway, I'm just, that's what burdens me kind of every day.
Oh,
So,
100%. And again, we're only as happy as our least happy child. So, I mean, at the end of the day, too, as a woman, I'm thrilled the success I've had. I've had a hard road to get here, and I wouldn't wish some of my life on my worst enemy. But the things that matter to me long term are my children and their happiness and success. And so, the fact that that's going well makes everything else really not kind of trivial in the great scheme of things. So
yes,
that's what matters. And
those are
women
the eternal
need to
things.
yeah, women need to remember that the world tells us not to do that. And I see that a lot with young women in particular, don't want kids. And it's really tragic. We need people to marry and have families and not be afraid. And I think that's
Right.
all really desperately important right now.
Beautifully said. Amanda, thank you so much for coming on the show and recording this with us. Would you mind sharing, if people want to reach out to you, how would they go about doing that?
Sure. The website is punchingnungroup.com. And my email is amanda@punchingnungroup.com. So happy to chat with you about anything associated with marketing. That's what we do. Got to trust a nun, as we like to say.
Love it. I absolutely love it. Thank you once again for being on the show, and thank you everybody for listening to another episode of the Growth, Grace, and Prosperity podcast. I'm Stewart Heath, and we hope that you'll tune back in and follow another episode. Thanks a lot.
Thanks for tuning in to the Growth, Grace, and Prosperity podcast. If you'd like to be a guest, visit growthgraceprosperity.com/guest. We'd love to hear your story.